What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Previews. And yesterday we were seeking revenge and we got it, baby. 4.62 units profit. Let's go. If it's your first time, I do these videos every single day. I preview all the NBA player props, all the key ones anyway. We talk through their lines, we talk about the matchups, and ultimately I end up with my final bets, which you can choose to tell. But I think the research is the most important part. And I give you all the information that you need to make the most informed, educated decisions before you place your bets on the NBA. I'll be sharing my screen. I'll take you through Outlier. I do have a 7-day free trial if anybody's interested in giving it a go. The link for that is in the description box below. Now, let's go. Now, we got 8 games on this slate. I am recording this quite late. I've been a little bit tired and had an afternoon nap, and it went for a little bit too long. So I'm going to get through this a little bit quicker than I normally would. I really focus in on the key matchups. But as always, check the pinned comments if you want to see my final bets. But we're starting things off with the Philadelphia 76ers versus Dallas Mavericks. In this particular game, Kelly Oubre is a game time decision. Outside of that, a lot of the key players should be there. So we'll start with the guys from Dallas first. Luka Doncic, we'll start with him. His points prop is at 32.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. He's got a difficult matchup against the 76ers, but in head-to-head matches, he's gone under the last 2 games against Philly. Jumping into his assist prop, the line is at 10.5. You can get that for plus money, though. The matchup, somewhat not difficult, but not hard either. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10, 3 consecutive games now, and he's gone under his assist prop the last 2 games against Philly. Jumping into his rebounds, the line's at 9.5. That's also plus money. The matchup's not too bad, and he's covered this in 1 of his last 3 games. Now, Luka's always going to fill up the stat sheet. I don't have a particular play on him for this one, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes off in this one. Somebody who probably could cover their line quite well, based off what I've seen, is Derek Lively. So his points prop is at 7.5. You can see he's covered this in 8 out of his last 10 games. He's got a good matchup against Philly. Destroyed Boston 15 points. There's a lot of dunks, a lot of putbacks, Lob City. It's all happening. He's yet to verse the Philadelphia 76ers in his short career, but he has performed quite well as of late, covering in 8 of his last 10 games. So I do like this play for Derek Lively. Looking at his rebound prop, his line is at 6.5. Now, he's gone under in 6 consecutive games now. It is plus money, and he does have a difficult matchup against Philly, but keeping in mind no Joel Embiid. But the reason why he's gone under so frequently is that this guy's protecting the rim. He is blocking a lot of shots, or attempting to block a lot of shots, ultimately taking himself out of position to get rebounds. So if you look at his blocks prop, that's at 1.5. You can get that for plus money. 76ers do get blocked quite a lot, 2.1 times per game. Well, that's just centers, actually. They allow 2.1 blocks to centers. Overall, they get blocked 6.1 times per game. So this is a good matchup for Derek Lively to get some blocks. Very capable of it. He's covered in 5 of his last 10, but certain games against certain teams, he's getting a lot of blocks. So obviously, didn't get there against Boston. Boston take a lot of threes. They don't attack the rim that much at all. But if you're up against a team that's going to attack the basket, Derek Lively's going to be there to meet you. So I don't mind that. I'm going to add Derek Lively to my short list here to look into many players, to be honest. So Derek Lively, you're on the list, my bro. I'll look at his points and blocks, but I don't mind that already. Who else have we got? Kyrie Irving. Now, Kyrie's points prop in this one is 26.5. The matchup is not that difficult. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. Had a very bad game against Boston. Shot the ball poorly, to be honest. And in head-to-head matchups, he has versed Philly 3 times since he's joined Dallas. He's gone under in 2 consecutive games. So that is quite a high line. Looking at his assist prop, it's 3.5. It's minus 165, though, but he's gone under in 5 consecutive games. The matchup is a good one, though, for him to get assists. And in head-to-head matches, he's covered this assist prop in 3 consecutive games against Philly, 6, 5, and 8. His rebound prop, that is 4.5. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10. Difficult matchup. And against Philly, though, he's covered his last 2 games. So, look, if I was going to play a Kyrie prop, it probably would be the assist. But at minus 165 odds, I'm not overly aroused by that. If you want to get better odds, you can take the 4.5 plus 130. But again, he hasn't been doing that well lately, although he has covered it against Philly in the past. So not overly keen on them. And PJ Washington, he's someone that I wanted to look at purely because he's got a bigger role here in Dallas. He's had two pretty strong games scoring the ball, 23 and 17 points. The matchup is on the difficult side, but he has covered in 4 of his last 10. He's playing over 30 minutes. His last 2 games, he's attempted 16 shots in both of those games. So there was some headlines about how Jason Kidd wants him to step up. They want him to be the third option on offense, not Tim Hardaway, and they also want him to create a bit more. So PJ Washington points, if you're buying into the hype, not the hype, the recent trend in his shot attempts, he's a good target. Luka likes to find him. He should be able to cover this 13.5 with ease, to be honest. But he's one I'll look into. I'm not sold on it, but I think it's a good call out regardless. So PJ Washington points, you're on the list. I wouldn't touch his assists or his rebounds. But let's look at these guys from Philadelphia. We'll start with Buddy Hield. So I was very close. I was leaning on his assist prop in the last game, and he covered it in the first quarter. So I was a bit devastated about that. But he has an excellent matchup in this game. The Mavs allow the third most points to shooting guards. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10. He has gone under in 4 straight. I think Kyle Lowry added to the rotation has slowed down Buddy Hield a little bit. You can see his minutes are down the last 5. Well, that's his new average, I would assume. The low 30 minutes. Low 30s, meaning he's only shooting the ball probably 10 to 12 times. Yet to play Dallas since he joined Philly, but check out his assist prop. It's 3.5. He's covered in 9 out of his last 10. He does have a good matchup. 9 out of his last 10 is crazy. 9 out of his last 10, got a good matchup, but the concern for me is these odds. It's minus 148. Maybe if you can find it better elsewhere, definitely worth taking. Or if you're using one of those apps where it's just over under, Buddy Hield assist is a good one. Well, maybe if you're looking at same game parlays, Buddy Hield assist could get in there. So I'll take note of Buddy Hield assists. But yeah, I'm not overly sold on his points prop despite the good matchup because his shot attempts just aren't there. Dallas don't play defense very well, but they don't defend people driving to the rim. In terms of leaving people wide open, they don't necessarily do that. So if there's somebody on this Philly team who's going to attack the rim, it's probably someone like Tyrese Maxey, someone a little bit more aggressive. Dallas probably won't have a good enough time resisting him, but Maxey's points props 28.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. He's got a difficult matchup against Dallas. He has gone under the last 2 times he's played Dallas too. His assist prop is at 5.5. Not a difficult matchup here, but he's only covered this in 5 out of his last 10. He does tend to land on 5 quite a bit when he struggled against Dallas. He did get 7 in the last game, but he has gone under the prior 2 games. So Tyrese Maxey, I'm not overly sold on. Tobias Harris. Now, I think he just had a big game, but this guy's inconsistent as hell. I wouldn't know when to bet on him. He scored 31 against Charlotte after being a piece of shit for 5 games. But Tobias Harris has a good one. He has struggled against Dallas, though. Check this out. Gone under in 3 consecutive games against Dallas. Looking at his rebound prop, it's at 6.5. He has covered in 5 out of his last 10. He's got a good matchup. Had 12 rebounds last time against the Charlotte Hornets. But against Dallas, again, he struggled. So Tobias Harris, he puts out these big games every now and then. And when he does, I think, shit, why didn't I take that? The reason why is because you can't predict when he does, and he normally sucks. Jumping into the Warriors versus Boston game. Also, one other pick that I'm probably going to play on this Philly versus Dallas game is probably the under. I think it's at 236. I feel like that's too high for this particular game. So I'm factoring that. I think the game is going to go under, so I'm not overly keen on a lot of these points props. So PJ Washington and Derek Lively, they're the main ones, but I don't like Luka or Kyrie to absolutely explode today. I don't think that's required. Golden State Warriors versus the Boston Celtics. The script in my mind says that this game will be a lot closer than the line suggests. The line's at 11. I do like the Warriors to cover, although it comes down to whether Steph Curry's playing or not. So Steph Curry's a game time decision. Podziemski's a game time decision. And for Boston, Kristaps Porzingis is a game time decision as well. So we do have limited props available. But we'll start with Steph Curry. Hopefully he does play. But let's see what he's suffering from. So he's got a bruised knee, apparently. Podziemski has right knee soreness as well. And Kristaps has a right quad strain or something like that. So let's check out Steph Curry. He's covered this line of 25.5 in 4 out of his last 10 games, which isn't great, but loves playing against Boston. He's covered it in 3 consecutive games against the Celtics, and he has a good matchup. So the Boston Celtics allow a lot of points to point guards. They don't, however, allow a lot of assists. So if Steph Curry is good to go, I'd honestly be leaning on the over here. Very capable of it. I don't care that he's injured. Steph Curry, But looking at his assist prop, it's at 4.5. Somewhat difficult matchup. Covered in 8 of his last 10, and he's covered it in 3 consecutive games against Boston. So despite the difficulty in the matchup, Steph Curry has still covered. Rebound prop, that's at 3.5. He's got a good matchup. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10, and he's covered in 2 of his last 3, but he did only have 3 rebounds against Boston last time. So a lean that I'm probably going to take for this is points plus assists for Steph Curry. Points plus assists, purely for the reason that he can contribute 2 ways. If, however, Boston changes their defense and they force Steph Curry into a creator, he can probably still get 20 points, 20 to 25 points, but then he could really dime them up. So he's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. Head-to-head matchups, he's obviously covered in all 3, but 6 out of his last 10 points and assists, better than 4 out of his last 10, where it's just his points, right? Steph Curry points plus assists, that's a lean for me at the moment. Who else is there to look at? Jonathan Kuminga. So has found his form again. So he went through this pretty poor patch. Lines at 18.5, covered in 5 of his last 10, but his last 4 games have been terrific. He has, though, a very difficult matchup. The Celtics allow the fewest points to power forwards on the season. Kuminga has gone under in his last 2 games against Boston. 18.5, though. He's playing 28 minutes per game in this 4-game stretch where he's been killing it. He's been shooting a high percentage, and in his last 2 games, he's been shooting the ball a lot. So I'm not overly keen on Jonathan Kuminga, for being honest with you. That matchup against the wings and the length that the Boston, I'm not overly stimulated by. But looking at the Celtics players, let's go from Drew Holiday and work our way up. So Drew Holiday, he's got a good matchup to score some points. His points props at 12.5, but he's covered in 4 out of his last 10. The good news, Drew Holiday scored 13 points the last time they played the Golden State Warriors, but you're cutting it pretty close. The fact that this is plus money does intrigue me a little bit, though. But what's crazy is this 11 points from against Dallas. I'm pretty sure he got most of that done in the first quarter. Made a lot of 3-pointers, but he only shot the ball 6 times. So he's not very aggressive trying to score, so it's a difficult prop to take. Looking at his assist prop, he's got a good matchup here as well. The line's at 5.5. It's plus money. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. And looking at the head-to-head matchup, only had 1 assist the last time he played the Warriors. His rebound prop is 4.5. The matchup's not good nor bad, but he's covered in 4 of his last 10. Did have 7 rebounds against the Warriors last time, but nothing for Drew Holiday screaming out to me. Derek White, I already know he's inconsistent as hell. Using Outlier to look at Derek White, that's not going to help you. Jaylen Brown, though, let's see what kind of trends this man's got. So the matchup's not that difficult, but he has covered this in 3 straight, 4 out of his last 10. So he's broken free out of a shit patch by the looks of things. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 2 out of his last 3. What's interesting about this is the 2 games where he's gone over have both been in the Bay. So got road games at Golden State. The home game, he only scored 16 points. This game is a home game for them. I don't know if you read too much into that. But yeah, Jaylen Brown props sometimes can be quite difficult because he is inconsistent. His rebound props at 6.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. Has a difficult matchup, but he's rebounded very well against the Warriors in the past, covering this line in 3 straight games. So Jaylen Brown, that makes it a bit difficult. Jason Tatum, apparently the new face of the league. I bet on Jason Tatum over in his PRAs in that last game against Dallas. Did nothing the whole first quarter. He killed it the 3 quarters after that, but I was still angry about it because he just put me through this emotional trauma I wish I didn't have to go through. But I happened to be on that day I got destroyed. So he was one of the 2 bets that I actually won. So no ill feelings towards Jason Tatum. It was just a frustrating time for me, I guess. But his points prop is at 28.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10 games. The matchup's not good or bad, but he's only covered against the Warriors in 1 of 3 games. His rebound prop, though, I'll go to his assist prop actually. That's at 5.5, which seems quite high, but he does have a good matchup. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10 and 2 out of his last 3 against the Warriors. So last 2 games, 6 and 7 assists against the Golden State Warriors. I think the Warriors will obviously try to limit his scoring, which they've done in the past, but he's obviously going to be a focal point of their offense, so the assists can come. He had a few nice passes against Dallas, though. He only had 3 assists, but a lot of those were very nice passes. So I'd probably lean to the over for Jason Tatum assists in this one, but I don't want to put myself through the trauma of betting on Jason Tatum. His rebound prop is at 8.5. He does have a good matchup. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10 and 1 of 3 games against the Warriors. So one of those games he had 19 boards, which was a home game for them. But similar to Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, wildly inconsistent, and the matchup's not good enough for me to take, but definitely leaning his assists. Kristaps Porzingis, he got a quad injury or a cork or something like that. His points prop would be at 21.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup's not good or bad, but he's yet to verse the Golden State Warriors since he joined the Boston Celtics. So 7 out of his last 10 he's covered, though. And if you're looking at rebound props, he's covered. His line's at 6.5, and he's covered in 5 out of his last 10. So, yeah, not feeling any of these Boston Celtics players, I'll tell you that. So Kuminga, it's a no from me, but Steph Curry, depending on whether he plays, that could be a pick that I take. Jumping into the next one, it's the Los Angeles Clippers versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards is a game time decision, as well as Zubac. Russell Westbrook is out. I think he's got a fractured hand for the Clippers. A part of me feels like it might even benefit them because he hasn't been playing that well lately, but Timberwolves, -1 favorite in this one. So a very close game is expected. So let's go through these Clippers, starting with James Harden. His points prop is at 16.5. Obviously, the Timberwolves have one of the best defenses in the NBA this season. In terms of how they defend point guards, they allow the 4th fewest points to point guards. So James Harden's covered this 16.5 in 8 out of his last 10 games. 2 games against the Timberwolves this season, he scored 14 and then 17 points. Looking at his assist prop, that's at 7.5. It's -137 though, but he has covered in his last 4 games. Wolves allow the 7th fewest assists to point guards on the season, and he's split in the 2 games, 8 and 6 for James Harden. Looking at his rebound prop, the line for this is 4.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup is difficult, and he's gone under in his rebound line both games against the Timberwolves. I'm not feeling that. Paul George, his points props at 19.5. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 10 games. The matchup isn't too bad for him, but 3 out of 10 nonetheless. In head-to-head matchups against Minnesota, he's only covered in 1 of his last 4. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 3.5. It's plus money. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10, and he's gone under in 3 consecutive games against the Wolves. Rebound-wise, line's at 4.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10, but he's covered in 6 consecutive games. The matchup isn't a bad one, and he has rebounded well against the Timberwolves in the past, covering in 3 out of his last 4. The problem with this one is you're getting odds of about -140. So I'm going to put PG rebounds on my short list anyway. It could make its way into some parlays perhaps, but yeah, not feeling it as a single bet. So what I'm going to do is kind of keep track of the picks that I think will hit, but are at shit odds. Not shit odds, but lower odds, such as like Paul George rebounds, Buddy Hield assists, I think. So those types of plays that are about -140, 150, or whatever it is. But then I might parlay those ones together. The other ones where I'm trying to aim for a lot more value, obviously a lower chance of hitting. Those ones I don't think are smart to parlay. Look, being honest with you, I know a lot of you guys have been leaving comments about parlays. I just wouldn't do them, to be honest, if you're serious about making profit. But I know that they're the most fun and exciting way to bet. So I'll dabble. I'll share a parlay with you guys. But I've made up in my mind, these are the types of plays that I'll put in there. So PG rebounds, definitely one for me to consider. What else are we going to look at? Kawhi Leonard. His points prop is at 24.5. His matchup isn't too bad. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. He has covered in 2 straight, but he struggled against the Wolves. He's only covered in 1 out of his last 4. Jumping into his assist prop, he had a lot of assists the other day, I believe. Probably not too much. 6 assists against the Lakers. His line's at 3.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. The Timberwolves allow the fewest assists as power forwards on the season. He has covered in 2 out of his last 4 against them, though. Looking at his rebound prop, we can see it's at 6.5. He's covered in 4 consecutive games. The Wolves don't allow many rebounds. Kawhi has covered in 2 out of his last 4. So Yeah, there's no real look. The only reason you would take this is because it's plus money and he's hit it in 4 consecutive games. Other than that, I can't see a reason to take Kawhi Leonard rebounds or any Kawhi Leonard play, to be honest. Quick look at Zubac. His points prop is at 9.5. He has covered in 4 straight, 6 out of his last 10. Difficult matchup against Rudy Gobert. He's covered in 1 of his last 4 games against Rudy. But rebound wise, lines at 8.5. It's plus money. 6 out of his last 10 games. Very difficult matchup, but he has covered this line in the 2 games this season against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So that's not too bad for Zubac, but again, Rudy Gobert to deal with. I'm not overly keen on that one. Jumping into these Timberwolves, we'll start with Ant Edwards. I know it's a game time decision, but let's see how he goes. He only played minimal minutes against the Sacramento Kings. Left it halfway to see his baby, though. It wasn't see the birth of his child. It wasn't due to an injury, but he still has some left ankle soreness. He's covered this line in 7 out of his last 10 games. The matchup against the Clippers is not a bad one, but he's only hit this in 1 of his last 5 games against them. Keeping in mind he's in good form at the moment. His assist props at 4.5. 6 out of his last 10. He has gone over in his last 2 games against the Clippers, 6 and 8. So that's a quite interesting one. Rebounds, lines at 4.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10, but he's rebounded quite well. So 9 and 7 rebounds in the last 2 games against the Clippers. I believe both of those games were this season. So what we know is Anthony Edwards rebounds and assists. He's absolutely destroyed against the Clippers lately. But in his last 10 games, he's covered his rebounds and assist prop, 7 out of the last 10. And against them, he's had 15 rebounds and assists in the 2 games this season. First game was in Minnesota, second game in Los Angeles. So I don't mind the Anthony Edwards RA for this one. So I'm going to take that down, put it on my short list. I know he's injured, and I normally try to steer away from people who are injured, but look, he still played against Sacramento. He didn't leave because of an injury, so very likely that he's going to play. And even if we look at his last 10, you obviously got to remove the 18 minutes he played against Sacramento. Didn't play a full game in that one, so technically 7 of his last 9, right? So Anthony Edwards, I don't mind that at minus 104 too. So that's a pretty good lean on my part. Karl Anthony Towns, his points prop is at 20.5. Difficult matchup against the Clippers. He's covered in 5 of his last 10, scored 24 and 17 in the 2 games this season. I'm not going to make a big deal out of Karl Anthony Towns and his bitch-ass voice, but I don't like betting on this guy. 5 out of his last 10, he's covered his rebound prop. Lines at 7.5, it's plus money. He has a pretty good matchup under in his last 2 games against them. So Karl Anthony Towns, I'm not feeling you. Rudy Gobert, his points prop, 13.5. Covered in 5 of his last 10. The matchup against the Clippers is a difficult one, but Rudy's covered his line quite well against them in the past. Check that out. 4 consecutive games now. 4 out of the last 5 games against the Clippers. Rudy's got it done scoring-wise. And look, it makes sense if Anthony Edwards loading up the assists and Karl Anthony Towns not scoring very well. Rudy's going to chip in quite a bit too. So, yeah, I don't mind this, minus 119. If this was like closer to plus 100, then I'd probably definitely take it. But I don't think that that's worth the gamble. Looking at his rebound prop, that's at 12.5. Difficult matchup against the Clippers. He's hitting 6 of his last 10 and 3 of his last 5 against the Clippers. Had some monster games. I think 10 rebounds, 10 points for Rudy Gobert is pretty safe, but you're not going to get the best odds for that. Could find its way to a parlay perhaps, but yeah, I think this would be a good game to watch. Probably not a great game to bet on though. So let's jump into the next one. We're looking at the Detroit Pistons versus the Orlando Magic. So this game's not going to capture many many viewers, but could be a good game for value when it comes to betting. In terms of players, everybody looks good to go. We'll start with the Detroit Piston players first. Cade Cunningham, 21.5 points is his line. So it's gone down a little bit. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. Somewhat difficult matchup against Orlando. He's covered in 1 out of 4 games against them, which happened to be their most recent one. His assist props at 6.5. Difficult matchup, covered in 7 of his last 10, 2 of his last 4 against the Magic. His rebound prop, I think a lot of people took the over 3.5 in his last game against Cleveland. Only finished on 3, but you can see why they took it. The odds weren't that great for it either. Difficult matchup against the Magic. I think it's a more difficult matchup than the Cleveland matchup. You do get better odds for this pick though, and he has rebounded well in the last 2 games against the Orlando Magic. So both of these being this season, I think that might be worth taking a -110. It's not the worst, but could be a very painful experience. So I think there's a chance that goes over. It's just not a play that I want to take. Who else do we have on this team to really look at? Asar Thompson. I'd probably just look at his rebound prop, but his points prop doesn't look too bad. 9.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. I play in the 3 these days, so the matchup isn't too bad against Orlando. He has gone under in 1 of 3. He's only hit in 1 of 3 games against them. Rebound wise, the line's at 5.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10, but only in 1 of 3 games against Orlando. So this one against Cleveland, his line was 5.5. I know that because I had it as one of my leans. My concern was that he was playing at home, and at home he doesn't rebound very well. So let's check his away games. Check this out. He's covered in 7 of his last 10 games on the road. So could get it done, but it's not screaming out to me. I'm not loving it. Jalen Duren, let's check this boy out. Points line's at 13.5. It's plus money. We like that. He's hitting 6 out of his last 10. That's not too bad. The matchup is on the difficult side, and head-to-head games against Orlando, he's covered his points prop in both games against them this year. 15 and 16 points. So Jalen Duren, I don't mind that. I think it gets quite close. I'm looking at his rebound prop. That's at 11.5. The matchup isn't awful, but it's not great either. 5 out of his last 10 games, but yet to cover this rebound prop this season against the Magic. He's only covered in 1 out of his last 6 games against them. So definitely liking his points prop a lot better than his rebound prop. So I'll add his points prop to my short list of things to look into a little bit further. Who else is there? Jaden Ivey. Points prop is 15.5. Difficult matchup. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10, and he's covered in 3 of 7 games against the Magic. His assist props at 3.5 plus money, so I do like that. 6 out of his last 10. Yes, it's a difficult matchup, but he's hit it quite well against Orlando in the past. 5 out of his last 7 games against the Orlando Magic. The games where he's gone on. So this game he played 35 minutes. This game played 21 minutes. Outside of that, he's gone over in all of them. So yeah, I don't mind Jaden Ivey assists, to be honest, at these odds. I know that the matchup is difficult, but good odds don't care. So I'll put that on my short list. Jaden Ivey assists. Looking into these Orlando Magic players, we'll check Suggs, just his points prop. He's hitting 6 out of his last 10. Does have a good matchup for this one. 6 out of his last 10. Detroit give up a lot of points to point guards. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 5. So 10.5, very manageable for someone like Jalen Suggs. Doesn't take a lot of shots though, averaging 8 shot attempts per game. So you'd really need him to be accurate. Half of those, more than half of those, being from 3-point land. So not ideal because you're not betting on volume. You're really looking for a high percentage. So if he misses his first couple of shots, chances are your bet's lost. Wendell Carter Jr. Now, I used to bet on this guy. I think it was last season. I used to bet on him quite heavily, but this season he hasn't come up on my radar. So he does have a good matchup against Detroit. 5 out of his last 10 he's covered in. In head-to-head matches, he's covered in 5 out of his last 6. The last 2 games are the ones I'd probably put more stock into because they're into this season. This is last season games against them. You can see that much better production. Last 2 games, not so much. But you can see last season, these 4 games, he was shooting the ball a lot more. Last 2 games against Detroit this year, 4 attempts and 5 attempts. So not a big fan of that. He's clearly not a focal part of their offense. And rebound-wise, he's only covered in 3 out of his last 10, but rebounded well against Detroit in the past. But yeah, he's not playing the same minutes. He's not playing to the same level that he was last year. So I'd probably avoid that. Wouldn't put too much stock into his form against the opponent, given that different type of player this year. Paolo Banchero, his point props at 20.5. He does have a good matchup against the Pistons. Scored 15 points against them last time, though. He's covered in 5 of his last 10, and he's only gone over in 2 of his last 7 games against them. So his points props are definitely a no. Assist-wise, he only had 3 assists the last time against the Pistons, but He's covered in 7 of his last 10 games, but he's only covered in 2 of his last 7 against the Pistons. Rebound-wise, it's at 6.5. It's plus money. He had 5 rebounds against them. Geez, he didn't do much against them at all. 3 out of his last 10. He's got a difficult matchup, and he's covered in only 2 of his last 7 games against the Pistons. So what I'm thinking here is, do we fade Banchero? So this is his PRA. He's covered his PRA against them 2 out of 7 games. Only had 23 PRA the last time these teams matched up. In his last 10, he has gone over it in 6 of his last 10. So, yeah. I'm not fading Banchero on this one. Detroit not very good defensively, so there's a chance he scores 40s, right? So, Franz Wagner, his points props at 19.5. He's covered in 4 out of his last 10. The matchup is a good one against the Pistons. He has covered in 4 out of his last 7 against the Pistons, but only scored 14 points in their last matchup. Assist-wise, 4.5. He's covered in 6 of his last 10. Good matchup, but only in 2 of 7 against them. Rebound-wise, the line's at 4.5. He's covered that in 6 of his last 10 and in 4 of 7 against the Pistons. So I'm not liking Franz either. That means I'm going to put this on my list to really look into for tomorrow. You want to look at someone like Cole Anthony, right? So if you're not getting a strong vibe that Banchero and Franz, so you want to look at Cole Anthony or Mo Wagner, right? These are 2 guys that come off the bench for Orlando that can put up very good points, rebounds, and assists. So they're the types of guys I'd be looking for. Both of them, Cole Anthony and Mo Wagner, will have a strong matchup in this. So for this particular game, I really do like those. You just have to wait closer to game time till their lines come out. But jumping into the Toronto Raptors versus the Charlotte Hornets now, Brandon Miller is a game time decision. He's coming back from a back injury. We'll see how that goes. I think the last time Brandon Miller was expected to play, I took the under in his points. But in this particular game, the matchup's not great. So we'll probably start with Brandon Miller so I can talk through it a little bit more. So his points props at 19.5. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10 games. So that's one reason to take the under. The other reason I was thinking of taking the under is if I look at his away games, he's gone under in 5 straight. So not doing well on the road as of late. But the reason why I shan't be is that the Toronto Raptors allow the most points to small forwards on the season. So I'm a little bit hesitant to take that. Brandon Miller scored 20, 14, and 20 in the games against the Toronto Raptors. But the one game he did go under was the road game. And this is a road game for Brandon Miller. So just wanted to share a little bit of context around that, just in case you see other people backing his over. There are reasons why you shouldn't. There's also reasons why you shouldn't take the under. So I'm personally just fading Brandon Miller or near him. Miles Bridges, let's have a look at him. His points props at 23.5. Somewhat difficult matchup. He's only covered in 3 of his last 10. And he did score 45 points against the Raptors last time, and they still lost. 22 points the game prior to that. His rebound prop, I've been winning quite a bit on his rebounds. I think I've bet his rebounds 2 or 3 times, but the line's at 8.5. 6 out of his last 10 he's covered in, but 5 of his last 6 has struggled rebound. Not struggled, but he's got under this line twice against the Raptors this year. So falling to 8 rebounds. His recent rebounding form is great, but matchup somewhat difficult. I think he does finish on 7, 8, or 9 rebounds, somewhere around there. Who else is there? We've got Trey Mann. See if there's any value in Trey Mann. I think knowing what I know about the Raptors, his assist could be a good play, but let's go through all his props. His points props at 13.5. He's only covered in 2 out of his last 10, and he's got a difficult matchup against the Raptors. So I'll probably lean to the under on that one. His assist prop is at 5.5. It's plus money. He's got a great matchup. 4 out of his last 10 games, he's covered this. So who I think actually gets a lot of assists, and I've noticed this whenever Charlotte plays, it's that guy off the bench, the European guy. What's his name? Michik or something like that. He gets a lot of assists in limited time. So that could be a play if he ever has props available. But Trey Mann, looking at his rebounds, 4.5, 5 of his last 10. He's got a decent, but wildly inconsistent. A bet that I had been taking for Trey Mann is this. It's obviously I was taking it back here. He has fallen into a little bit of a slump, but it's his rebounds plus assists. He has an excellent matchup for both stat categories against the Toronto Raptors, but his recent form isn't great. He is playing decent minutes, though. close to 30 minutes a night. So he hasn't seen a reduction in his minutes. His overall production has dropped off. So one to consider. Who else is there? So there's no one else. Ooh, Nick Richards. Let's have a look at Nick Richards. Sometimes I bet on him. Points props at 12.5. Matchup's not too bad against the Raptors. He has covered in 5 of his last 10, but has struggled recently against the Raptors. Looking at his rebound prop, 9.5. 4 out of his last 10. Good matchup though, but 2 of his last 5 against the Raps. So I'm not feeling that. Let's jump into the Raptors. Emmanuel quickly. Points prop, 4 out of his last 10. 21.5. Somewhat difficult matchup against Charlotte. It's scored 18 points the last time they played. That doesn't interest me. His assist prop, 3 out of his last 10. Last 2 games he's been killing it though. 9 against Dallas, 11 against the Warriors. Had 4 assists the last time against Charlotte. So quickly, he's one of those guys that definitely can have a big game, but quite inconsistent, so difficult to bet on. Let's have a look at RJ Barrett. So Scotty Barnes obviously injured in this game too, so that's something that you need to factor in. There's going to be no stats without Scotty because he's been playing every single game, but who in your mind do you think is going to step up for these Toronto Raptors without RJ Barrett? I mean, without Scotty Barnes. So could that mean Emmanuel quickly sees a big lift to his assists? Could it be RJ Barrett, right? So RJ Barrett, his points prop is at 21.5. He's got a great matchup in this game. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10, and he scored 23 points the last time these guys played. His rebound prop is at 6.5. It's plus money. He's hit this in 3 out of his last 10 games, though, and had 6 rebounds the last time against them. And his assist prop is at 4.5 plus money. Has had games where he's been pretty decent in this. Good matchup. 5 of his last 10 had 5 assists last time against the Charlotte Hornets. So what I'm thinking of taking here, RJ Barrett over 26.5 points and assists. So without Scotty Barnes, they're going to need, it doesn't guarantee he's going to get more rebounds, right? They're just going to fill Scotty Barnes' position with somebody else. Like someone like Kelly Olynyk, not the greatest rebounder in the world, but he does have some size. So I don't think that means RJ Barrett gets more rebounds. But on the offensive end, they need someone who's going to create some offense. That will fall to Emmanuel quickly, but RJ Barrett sure to get more opportunities, not only scoring the ball, but creating on offense, so getting some assists. So I don't mind that. I do actually like the plus money on his assists. For him to go over 4.5, he's plus 112. His points prop minus 119. So it might even be an alternate points plus assist prop that I play to get better odds. I'd take this at 27.5. Why not? But 26.5, he has fallen very close around that. But I guess you're kind of betting on how does he play without Scotty Barnes. So actually, I might just take the assist prop. I'm not too sure. But RJ Barrett, points plus assists. It's on my list, and then we'll see where I land. All right, Jakob Poeltl. He's 12.5. He's got a great matchup against Charlotte here. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10 games. Has struggled against the Hornets in the last 4, covering 1 of his last 5. Rebound-wise, that's a good matchup too. Line's at 10.5. Just had 14 boards against the Warriors. So had 12 rebounds the last time they played, but again, 1 out of his last 5. So Jakob Poeltl wouldn't surprise me if he gets a decent double-double. Points plus rebounds could be a play. He has hit that in 6 of his last 10. He does have an excellent matchup. Hit that last time he played the Charlotte Hornets, 12-12. But yeah, it's gonna be very close, I think. But he's someone who can probably benefit with no Scotty Barnes, right? He might get a lot more rebounds too. So that could be another option. Personally, for me in this game, it's probably only RJ Barrett that I consider. But Emmanuel quickly assists. That could also be a play. The next one we're looking at is the Indiana Pacers versus San Antonio Spurs. So in terms of the game script for this one, actually the game script for Charlotte versus the Raptors, I think I was already leaning, I forgot to talk through this, but I'm leaning on the Raptors to cover in this one, despite missing Scotty Barnes. And for this Indiana versus Spurs, I think the Pacers get some revenge for themselves. I think they'll cover that 6.5. Like, I don't bet spreads very much, but you got to factor in how you think the game's going to go when you make these NBA picks. And the Pacers come back and absolutely maul the Spurs. They were embarrassing against the Pelicans. Embarrassing. So I think they come back with a little bit of vengeance. So let's go through these paces first, and then we'll get to the key players for the Spurs. Starting with Tyrese Halliburton. So he had the worst statistical game of his career in that blowout against the Pels. Scored 0 points, but his points prop in this one is 18.5. He does have a good matchup. He's covered in 3 of his last 10, but he's covered in the last 2 games against the Spurs. So if you're backing Tyrese Halliburton to bounce back, you take the over for sure. Assist props at 11.5 minus 120. Obviously, a good matchup against the Spurs, who don't defend much people at all. He's covered this in 1 of his last 2. So I think for Halley, points plus assists, probably the best play because he can do both, right? He's capable of 15 to 20 assists on any given night. He can also score 25 to 30 points. So he's only hit this in 3 out of his last 10, though. He has covered this in both of his last 2 games against the San Antonio Spurs. And if there is going to be a bounce back and that Pacers offense is on fire, Tyrese Halliburton's going to be doing something about it. So that's Halley. Who else do we have here? Pascal Siakam. So Pascal, his points prop is at 21.5. The matchup is quite not an easy one, I would say. If anything, it's probably the position the Spurs defend the best. But he's covered this in 4 out of his last 10. He's yet to versus Spurs since he joined the Pacers. So I'd lean to the under on Pascal. His assist prop is at 3.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10. He's got a decent matchup. His rebound line's at 6.5, and he's covered in 4 of his last 10. He's got a tough matchup there. So I probably lean Siakam under points plus rebounds. I'm not making the pick, but that's definitely how I'd be leaning. Miles Turner. Now, I just bet on him on the last game, and I was worried about it. And I bet on his for him to go over 7.5 rebounds. They got blown out, so he didn't get to play much in the second half. But I bet on him because his form at the time was going quite well. I was a little bit cautious because he was on the road, but 7.5 again is that plenty? So 6 out of his last 10. Good matchup against the Spurs. Where he also has a good matchup is on the points front. Lines at 16.5, minus 110, but the Spurs obviously give up a lot of points to centers. But he only scored 15 points the last time these guys played. And the Indiana Pacers beat them by 40 points in that game. So he only played 20 minutes. So there's a chance that they blow them out again. But in that blowout, he had 11 rebounds against them. So I'm liking Miles Turner rebounds, if anything. So I might take that play again. I might look at points plus rebounds because he was quite efficient. But I'll look into that a little bit further later on. So there's Miles Turner. Jumping into these Pacers, not Pacers, the Spurs. Let's have a look at Devin Vassell. So Devin Vassell has a good matchup here against the Pacers. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10 games. Scored 23 and 18 points the last 2 games against them. His assist props at 4.5. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. Seems to be in good form. 6 out of his last 7, really. The matchup with the Pacers is a difficult one, though, and he's gone under his assist prop in both games against them. Looking at his boards, it lines at 3.5, 5 of his last 10. Difficult matchup, and 1 of his last 2. So Devin Vassell, nothing screaming out to me there. Jumping straight into Wemby. He's got a difficult matchup to score points. His line is at 24.5. He only scored 13 points in that last game against the Indiana Pacers back in November. His assist prop is 4.5, and that's plus money. He does have a good matchup to get some assists. 5 out of his last 10 games, and he got 0 assists time these guys played. Rebound props at 11.5. He's got a difficult matchup. 5 out of his last 10 had 10 rebounds in that blowout loss to Indy. So the bet that I took for Wemby up against when they versed OKC was his rebounds plus assists. And I think the line for that was at 14.5 at the time. He finished on 20. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10, 4 out of his last 5 games. Rebounds, it's called out as a difficult matchup because of the whole Miles Turner factor, spreading the floor. But he had 10 rebounds against them last time, right? 10 rebounds last time, he had 0 assists. But the matchup for assists is a good one. And his assist numbers are starting to creep up. His rebound numbers are fairly consistent. And I feel like he can get the job done here. I know the Pacers might maul them in this game. I don't think they beat them by 40, but maybe 10 to 15, I'd be guessing. So Victor Wembanyama rebounds and assists. I think that's definitely something that's going to go on my list, and I'll research that a little bit further. God, he's got a long name. I'm not typing that whole thing. Wemby, rebounds and assists. All right. Other than that, I don't think there's anybody else in this game you should really consider. At the Knicks versus Cavaliers now. This particular game, Donovan Mitchell, game time decision, as well as Karis LeVert. So very limited markets available. You've only got D Mitch and the Knicks players. So Donovan Mitchell, is he still suffering from the same injury? Left knee soreness. Yes, it is. So his points prop is 24.5. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games. He's got a difficult matchup against the Knicks, and he's covered this in 6 out of his last 11 games versus the Knicks. This season, they played twice. He scored 26 and 30 points against the Knicks, but questionable with the injury, right? His assist props at 5.5, it's plus money. He's covered in 5 of his last 10 and 4 of his last 11. He's got 105 consecutive games against the Knicks. And looking at his rebound prop here, 4.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 11 against the Knicks and 6 of his last 10 overall, but he does have a difficult matchup. So even if Donovan Mitchell does play, that won't be a bet that I'll take. Looking at Jalen Brunson in this one. So Cavs are good. Both of these guys are good defensive teams. So it'd be interesting to see who breaks free here. His line's at 29.5. This game is being played on the road in Cleveland. The matchup's not difficult, but it's not easy either. Jalen Brunson has covered this line in 1 of 11 games against the Cavs. Turning to his assist prop, the line's at 7.5 plus money. Difficult matchup. He's covered in 5 of his last 10 and only in 1 of 11 games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So if you're looking at points plus assists, obviously he's covered in 1 of his last 11. The game that he did cover both, he scored 48 points and had 9 assists. That's pretty wild. Outside of that, it's been tough pickings for Jalen Brunson. Although I believe Julius Randle would have been playing in all of these games, including the 2 games this season. In his last 10, he's covered in 6 of his last 10. So I'd probably lean to the over for Jalen Brunson. I'd ignore all that historic form stuff because no Randle, different story. But I'm not man enough to place any bets on him right now. Dante DiVincenzo. Let's check Dante out. 6 of his last 10, he's covered 17.5 points. He does have a difficult matchup. Scored 16 points the last time these guys played. So DiVincenzo's really, I guess, not really started to slow down, but I think the lines are pretty sharp, pretty accurate for Dante. I've been putting up some pretty amazing games. You just got to know when to pick them. 5 consecutive games now, he's covered this points line. 11.5. Against the Cavs, does have a good matchup in this one too. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10, but he's only covered in 3 out of his last 8 against the Cavs. The 2 games this season, 5 points and 11 points. In those games, he only played 28 and 29 minutes. What we're seeing over this last 5-game stretch, where he's been covering his points prop very well, he's almost playing the whole game. Oh, Thibs is a madman. So, look, if Josh Hart's going to play 40-plus minutes and attempt at least 14 shot attempts, I think he can cover this 11.5. He can make easy layups. He can make some threes. He's shooting threes at a 40% clip. So this is a play that I'm actually liking. So I might like his rebound prop as well, but let me just write his points prop first. So I do like that. Checking out his assists don't really interest me, but he's hitting 7 of his last 10. Obviously struggled against the Cavs. The Cavs don't allow too many assists overall, so that's not one that I'd like, but rebounds, I might be able to entertain that. So, look, he's playing 40 minutes a night. 8.5 rebounds is his line. He's covered in 7 of his last 10. He does have a good matchup. He's covered in 2 of his last 8 against Cleveland. The games where he played 40 minutes, he had 7 rebounds and 12 rebounds in. So you can expect 1 or 2 extra rebounds in all of these other games if he was playing an extra 10 minutes. So, yeah, I don't mind that either. I think the points prop is probably the I wouldn't even say it's easier, but you can look at his points plus rebounds, 20.5, because he's covered that in 5 consecutive games, obviously, 7 of his last 10. Or you can just look at his points, really. But he's got a good matchup for both. I'm not too sure. I am not too sure, but he might even cover the 20.5 on points alone based on his shots. Who knows? So points plus rebounds, I can mess with, potentially. But Josh Hart, I do like that. Precious Achua, he's got a difficult matchup for scoring the ball. Wildly inconsistent, no head-to-head form. So I think where he has been playing better is on this rebound side of the ball. Yep. 6 out of his last 10 games. He has gone under in 2 straight, and he does have a difficult matchup. So Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen patrolling the paint could make life difficult. Hartenstein, I don't know what's up with this guy. Came back from injury. Well, I do know what's up with him. He's not playing the same number of minutes that he was before. So his rebound prop is at 6.5. Obviously, his hit rate on the season would be great because he was playing a lot more minutes then. But if he's only playing about 25 minutes, you could expect in this game. The matchup's not difficult, but I think that's hard to bet on, especially if he's on a minutes restriction. So from this particular game, obviously without seeing the other lines for all the Cavs players, Josh Hart, definitely the best one that I've seen. Let's jump into the last game. It's the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Phoenix Suns. Now, if we're talking about game script, I think the OKC Thunder blow these guys out. I think they cover I think the line's at 4.5. I think they cover that 4.5 very easily. Suns are on a back-to-back. Nurkic is out. Devin Booker is a game-time decision. So I'm pretty confident OKC doing some work here. Only props available are on the OKC Thunder, so let's check those guys out. Starting with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, his points props 31.5. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10. The Suns do allow a lot of points to point guards. SGA loves playing against the Suns. He's covered in 3 consecutive games, 40, 39, and 35. So I definitely lean to the over in this one. But he always finishes on 30 to 31 points, right? It's just this thing. I don't know. I might play. I do like his points prop. I'm pretty sure I'm making that clear. But I might even play SGA points 30 and into the OKC money line. So very similar to what I did with Jimmy Butler and the Heat versus the Jazz. So that cash for us. But just my thoughts at the moment. His assist props at 6.5. He's covered in 6 out of his last 10. He's gone under in 3 games against the Suns. Obviously, he's just scoring. Rebound wise, 5.5. 5 of his last 10. 1 of his last 3. So definitely the points is the way to go for SGA by the looks of the numbers. Let's check out J-Dub, Jalen Williams. Points props at 19.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10. That's a pretty good matchup. Scored some buckets here. And your head-to-head matchup. Scored 31 points the last time they played, but it's covered in 2 of his last 4. His assist prop, 4.5. It's covered in 7 of his last 10. It's covered in 1 of 4 games against the Phoenix Suns and has a difficult matchup. Rebound-wise, his line's at 4.5, difficult matchup. He's gone under in his last 2 games against Phoenix, and he's covered in 4 of his last 10. So, yeah, not getting a strong vibe on that one, but let's have a look at Chet. So, Chet has covered this points line, 16.5 in 5 consecutive games now. So, playing quite well, 7 out of his last 10. Scored 18 points the last time they played Phoenix. Obviously, there's no use in this game, so that makes life a little bit easier for Chet. So I'd obviously lean to the over on this one. But if I do play a same game parlay, I might even take SGA for 30, Chet for 15, OKC to win, based on what I'm seeing right now. But that's straight off the top of the dome. Looking at his assist props at 2.5. It's all over the place. 5 of his last 10. Did have 4 assists against Phoenix last time. Does have a good matchup for it, but wildly inconsistent. And then we look at his rebound prop, 8.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. Surprisingly been consistent over his last 6 games. Difficult matchup, but again, no Nurkic in this one. In the last game, he had 6 rebounds against them. So I'm pretty sure he would have covered his PRA against the last time. 28.5. Oh, he finished on 28. So that's a tough one. But yeah, I don't mind Chet for this one. I think SGA, obviously the stronger play, but something to do with Chet might make its way to my bet slip, I'm sure. Other than that, I don't think these other guys are worth looking into. I'm just going to check to see how we're going for time. So I should get this done in less than an hour, which is pretty good. But I think what are some of the call-outs that I do want to make? In terms of, I've got a lot of comments, which is great. You guys are really showing some support. In terms of subscribers, very close to 4,000. I think we only need 90 subscribers, perhaps. So if you haven't already, subscribed to the channel because your boy's getting busy. I do this every single night, giving you guys all the numbers that you need. I'm getting a lot of requests for parlays. And parlays are all good and well. Very serious about making profit, betting on sports. You have to bet single bets. All of these parlays, it's only going to go one way for you. You're going to have all this excitement, right? You can maybe hit a parlay or two. All this dopamine and serotonin gets rush through your body, makes you feeling great. And then that becomes a feeling that you chase, right? And then when you lose, it feels just as bad. And you feel like shit. And then you start making emotional decisions. All those types of things can happen. So if you're someone who plays a lot of parlays, if you're not profitable doing that, I'd encourage you to rein it back. Play some single bets. That's what I've been doing. I haven't lost money sports betting, you could say. Like, I've been in profit for what? This whole NBA season, really, I've been in profit. I'm surprised with how disciplined I've been. But this whole NBA season, I'm probably like 100 to 150 units up. But on these YouTube picks alone, I think we're sitting close to 60, but it's looking pretty good. So as always, I'll put my pin in with my final bets, but I encourage you guys to share what picks you're on. A lot of you guys are asking me questions. What are my thoughts on this? If you're watching this and you see somebody else put a pick up, feel free to share your opinion and whatever their pick is. Get amongst it. They may not have considered something, and you have the information and the answer to potentially help that person. So if you want to see more of my content, obviously just click up here. Check this video out. I'm sure it's going to be a banger because they all are. But I'll catch you guys in the next one. Be good. Peace.
The channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.